Turn your Bibles to Luke chapter 14. Luke 14. We're just going to read the three last verses of this chapter, Luke 14. Did I say 13? 14. Oh, why I'm thinking of 13. What do you think? 4. I said, what? 20. Yes. Luke 14. Luke 14, verses 33. Says, so likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its flavor, how can it be seasoned? It is neither fit for the land nor for the dunghill, but men throw it out. He who has ears to let him hear let him hear. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Verse 34 again, salt is good, but if the salt has lost its flavor, how can it be seasoned? We are called to be the salt of the earth. What does that mean? We are called to be the salt of the earth. What is salt? It's a preservative. Salt is a preservative. If salt loses its flavor, what's the purpose of it? It serves no purpose whatsoever. It is to be thrown out, cast on the dunghill, to be trampled out or trampled on by men. So if the church has lost its purpose, if the believer has lost its purpose, what good is it? It's of no purpose at all. This is prefaced by the statement that Jesus says, whoever does not forsake all that he has, that he possesses. How tightly are you holding on to your stuff? I don't care what it is. If you have anything in your life that you're not willing to lose all of it, that thing that you're holding on to is your God. It is not God. And what purpose do you serve if you continue to hold on to these things? What's the point? Well, you can tell me, you have no idea how hard I worked for those things. You have no idea the struggle. You have no idea. You're telling me I have no idea about struggle. I have no idea about hard work, about sacrifice, about losing, about winning, about gaining. You're telling me that I don't know? That's not even the point. It's what Jesus said. Unless you're willing to forsake everything. It's not even lose. Forsake. That means you willingly give it up. I found out yesterday another pastor committed suicide. Another pastor. Not just any pastor in particular, but a pastor from a very famous church. I don't remember the name. The name is not important. Why are pastors committing suicide? I'm asking a question.
Oh, fear.
Fear. Fear of what? Huh?
Exposure.
Exposure? Okay. Could be. There could be a scandal in the works that nobody knows about. I'm not going to suggest that in this case. I mean, I don't know. I don't have all the facts. The only fact I know is a pastor committed suicide. And this is not a new phenomenon. In fact, it's growing within the church. Pastors committing suicide to the point that now the church has to change its doctrine relative to the fate of those who commit suicide. What was always the belief about people who commit suicide? Where do they end up? Where? In hell, right? But now we have to change that. Why? Because we're not having just anybody commit suicide. We're having pastors commit suicide. And what do these pastors have for us? A huge resume of works. There's no way God could ever send them to hell because they took their own life. It was the pressures of life that were so overwhelming that it's understandable why they would take their life. So now, instead of bearing what we called for all time the consequence of their sin, which is hell, they're in the presence of God. We have to. Why do we have to do that? What does not allow us to accept their fate as being hell? What is it? It's our conscience. Our conscience cannot grasp that idea. They cannot grasp that idea. It's like trying to understand that your loved one who has gone on, has died, no evidence at all of ever loving God, accepting the fact they're in hell, waiting to be judged. You can't accept that. I can't accept that. Nobody can accept that. Why not? Why? Am I speaking to sleeping people?
You just don't want them. You don't want to believe that they're going to suffer in that way.
Why? It's a simple answer. Because you love them. You love them without reservation. You love them. You cannot accept that. So what do you fabricate in your mind?
It's all good.
The perfect scenario. What's the perfect scenario? That in their last moment, their last breath, just like the penitent thief, what did they do?
Repent.
They repented and God saved them. And they're in heaven. Now, all of us have to admit a simple truth. Nobody knows where anybody is except those that the Bible tells us. Right? Because we have no idea. How do you know? How do I know what happened at their last breath? How do you know if God didn't visit them? Is it impossible for God to visit somebody at their last hour? Of course not. Does God take pleasure in the death of any wicked man? None. Not one. You can think of the worst person. In fact, you might think that there are people who deserve hell. You might be sitting here and think, well, they don't deserve God's mercy. I have all the evidence against them to the extent. Who are you to judge somebody? Who are you to judge anybody? Is not God the God of mercy? Though he is also the God of judgment. So I can't sit here and tell you who's in hell and who's in heaven. I can't tell you. I can tell you who's in heaven based upon what the Bible tells me specifically. And we might have a good idea of who's in heaven based upon how they live their life, perhaps. But I have no idea. I don't. And I have no problem with that, nor admitting it. But I want you to appreciate that the scriptures that we read are not designed or interpreted by opinion or emotion or experience. The scripture verifies, defines, interprets itself. So why are pastors committing suicide now? Why? I believe it has something to do with the lie that men think. Christians think they're not supposed to suffer. That's what I believe. I believe Christians think they're not supposed to lose anything. Christians believe they're never supposed to go through the tribulation. And there's so many points about the tribulation that are so obvious. But I want you to hang on to something that is so key relative to every tribulation. Whether it's the tribulation you're going through now, or the great tribulation as defined in the book of Revelation, or as Jesus prophesied about would happen, would take place. Why would God leave his remnant here during a tribulation? Huh? To speak to those who aren't saved. Not only to speak, but what else? We not only speak, what do we do? What's more important than what we speak? Huh? We demonstrate. It's how we live our lives. So if God removes the righteous, what is the hope of anybody being saved? There's none. Let me ask you a question. In the beginning, what happened? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the earth. How come God didn't remove the darkness? What did God do instead of removing the darkness?
He gave light.
He created light. Now, what light is it that he created?
Good.
It's not the sun, it's not the moon, it's not the stars, because that was day 4. So what did he create? Or what did he dispense, if you will? Go to Revelation chapter 22, I believe. Yeah, 22. Revelation 22. John the Beloved talks about this light. Who subsequently happened to be the author of this particular book as well. Jesus was the light, the life of all men, in fact. Verse 5. This is talking about when all things have been completed, everything has been finalized. Verse 5 says, "And there shall be no night there. They need no lamp nor light of the sun, for the Lord God gives them light." That is not the verse I want to read, even though that is fitting. Go to the previous chapter. Verse 4. Let's start in verse 1. Sorry, 21:1. It says, "Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be with them, and he will be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, no more sorrow, no more crying, and there shall be no more pain of the former things they have passed. And he who sat on the throne said, Behold, I will make all things new. And he said to me, Write these words, the true and faithful." Why am I not finding this particular verse? Same chapter? Thank you. 23. Thank you, Yarida. "And the city had no need of the sun or of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God illuminated it." And what? The Lamb is its light. So in the beginning, what did God do? He separated darkness from light by what? Dispensing or giving his glory. So this light that we see in the beginning is the glory of God. So why did God not get rid of darkness? Why did he leave the darkness? Why didn't he just have it completely illuminated with his glory? God has always, and has from the very beginning, from day one, made a distinction between what is unholy and holy, what is common and sacred. The same reason why he will leave his church here during the Great Tribulation. The tribulations we go through now are for what purpose? You got to talk louder. You still got to talk louder. Sanctification. To make us holy, to purify us so we can learn obedience. That's why we have tribulation now. If you're not going through tribulation, there is a problem in your life. Because God disciplines His children. If you're not being disciplined by God, you are fatherless. It's a sad commentary, but it is what it is. God disciplines His people. How many people had to suffer? How many of the righteous have to suffer with the wicked? Do we have any examples of this in the Bible? Remember why God leaves the righteous here. It's an act of mercy for the wicked. It's an act of God's mercy. Are you willing to carry the cross that God has called you to bear, and that is to be an example for the wicked? Why doesn't the church wants to believe that it's going to be removed during the greatest trial that the world has ever seen? Where does judgment begin? If you go to the book of Ezekiel, go back to chapter 9, Ezekiel, what we read in the beginning. We only read a couple of verses, but go back to chapter 9. I want you to see. Ezekiel chapter 9. This is the same Ezekiel that God told, I take no pleasure in the death of any wicked man. Don't ever think that. Why would God send a prophet? Why does God send prophets?
To speak to His people.
Huh?
To speak.
For what purpose, though?
To repent. To bring them to
To
righteousness.
God does nothing without first revealing it to His servants, the prophets, for the purpose of us hearing it, so that we can repent. It doesn't mean we're going to, but giving us the opportunity to. So if God removes the prophets, how is there going to be salvation? What has God basically done? He's abandoned the world. He's eliminated the world's opportunity, possibility to repent. Everything that's happening on this planet is for whom? You have to every day remind yourself of this. Everything that's happening on this planet to this day is for whose purpose or whose benefit? Huh?
Everybody.
One nation in particular. For Israel. Why Israel? God selected them. God chose them from the very beginning. You are my people. And by you, speaking to Abraham, all of the nations will what? Be blessed. Why was America birthed? Why did America come into existence? Huh? Freedom of religion. Why was America birthed? What was God planning for Israel? A discipline, a chastening. But God has a limit with His chastening, does He not? Isaiah the prophet said, had you not had mercy on us, God, we would have been like Sodom and Gomorrah. What was the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah? A little bit of destruction?
Total destruction.
Completely.
Total destruction. Who survived Sodom and Gomorrah?
Nobody.
3 people.
Just the
Two
Lot,
right?
his family.
And Lot's wife,
She stayed there. So.
to a certain extent, because she disobeyed. Only 3 people. And when did God deliver them? I'm curious.
Right before destruction.
The day of destruction. Just like God's going to do with the church. Right, the morning of the destruction, right? That's when He got them. That's just to give you one example of what God's going to do for the church. Remember, hold on to this key. God's mercy is the reason why the church stays here. How many times have you asked for God to take you home? Am I the only one that has said, God, get me out of this place? And not because I can't put up with you. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with me. I'm tired. I am literally tired of being blindsided by sin. The things that I see. I'm not looking for anything. I'm not on the internet looking at stuff I don't belong looking at. I'm not talking about it. Just driving my truck. Even the billboards now. There is nothing. The conversations, the music. God, I'm tired of this. When can I be in your presence? What's wrong with wanting to be with God? Is there anything wrong with that? Besides it's completely selfish? I remember when I had first gone to Bible college, I had made friends with this one gentleman. And I remember we were coming from the gym and I was talking to him and I said, I can't wait for God to come back. I'm tired of this. And I was only 18 years old. I'm tired of this. I want God to come back. He goes, I don't want God to come back. I said, what's wrong with you? He said, how about all the people that you love that are going to hell? Because if He comes back, That's it. And I thought, my goodness, how selfish could I be? Are you willing to stay here during the tribulation so that people can see a godly example to follow? So that they can hear hope? You think you can preach hope in the tribulation? I haven't even told you what the tribulation's about either. We have pastors who can't even preach hope at a time when there is no tribulation. Oh, I'm not suggesting that they're not going through hard times. I'm not telling you that they're not suffering with depression, anxiety, and life. I know that. I've experienced that. And every once in a while I experience it, but I do not experience it like I used to before. Why do you think I don't experience depression like I used to experience before? Or you think that my life is free of problems? All of my problems have disappeared. Why do you think I don't struggle with depression anymore? What's the benefit of being tried? Having your faith tested? What's the end result? You are perfect and entire, lacking nothing. I'm perfect. Right? Am I perfect? Yes, I am. Whatever. I'm not perfect. That's not... No, perfect in the sense that I have no need. Paul said, may we be content with food and clothing. How many of you will be content with food and clothing? Well, it all depends. What type of food and what type of clothing. Paul had no idea that we would come to a day when clothing would be a god, when food would be a god. Could you survive? Would you be content with rice and beans? I would not. Maybe I should give something else, because that's a bad example. My father-in-law's like, that's what we're doing right now. I'm content with it. We're having rice and beans today. What do we have for dinner? Beans and rice. And what do we have for lunch? We're going to have beans and rice soup. It's all the same, right? But we're happy. Why are you content? They're already finished. They're not young enough to enjoy anything that this life can afford them, of course. But let the young people enjoy life. No, don't waste your youth on getting involved in things like that. Remember, what is the purpose of the church if it has lost its flavor? It's good for nothing. So if a pastor's committing suicide, what do you think its members are going to do? Huh? You got to talk louder, sweetie. You talk way too soft.
Commit suicide.
Well, they're not going to commit suicide. I mean, it's not like we're all lining up.
Well, there's no hope for them if their pastor had no hope.
They're going to lose hope. They're going to be like, my goodness, if the pastor lost hope, how about me? What confidence do I have? None. Bad is the man, or cursed is the man who puts his trust anyway in the arm of flesh. The fact that men are putting their trust in their pastor is already problem number one. God will remove anything and anyone that is in your way of getting closer to Him. Anything or anyone. Let me give you just a little bit of nugget of truth. If you are involved in a relationship with somebody you don't belong being involved in, you are a child of God, God will remove that person. You want that on you? Do you want that on you? God will remove from them, either from this planet, or He will strip everything from them to make sure they are never around you. You want that on your conscience? That you are the reason why somebody lost everything? Look at Jonah. What was the consequence of Jonah's rebellion? Those poor mariners that went out with all of their goods, everything they had worked so hard for with hopes of selling it somewhere else, what happened to them?
Yep.
They lost it all. The only good thing at the end of that story was, what was the benefit of it all? They worshipped God. So it was, in a sense, good, right? But we can be the reason that people lose everything because we're involved in a relationship with people that we do not belong being in. Cut it off immediately. That has nothing to do with anything that we're talking about today. That's just a little nugget of truth. So God keeps His church here for that purpose. How many people have had to suffer alongside? Why doesn't God remove them? I have to keep saying this so you never forget it. The purpose for you going through a trial, there are people watching you. And don't think that there's an audience outside there that's watching you. The most important audience that you have lives in your four walls. It's your house, it's your children, your in-laws, grandchildren, wherever you live. You are providing an example for them. Not only in what you say, but how you behave. How you live your life. Have we been stumbling blocks? Have we ever caused a little one to stumble? This should provoke fear in us. Fear, terror. What does God say if you cause one of my little ones to stumble?
It's better to tie up.
I don't care what your title is. I don't care how many messages you preach. I don't care how many people got saved under your ministry. I don't care how great you are, how many buildings are named after you. You cause one of my little ones to stumble. Better for you to have a millstone tied around your neck and cast into the deepest sea. There's no exclusion or exemption for anybody in that. Have you caused a little one to stumble by providing a bad example for them, perhaps providing a license for them to sin? God doesn't really think you need to be that holy. God doesn't really think that your speech really matters or your behavior matters. None of that really matters. You can't live like that. Are you kidding me? You're causing a little one to say, okay, I feel better now. Now I can keep living like this. We're supposed to provoke people to love and good works. This is why God's going to keep the church here. And the church is going to kick and scream the entire way. No, we're not going through it. No, we're not going through it. My goodness, I want you to think about anybody that has ever gone through a hard time in the Old Testament. And then we'll get to the New Testament. You think people in the Old, you think the righteous suffered? Where was Ezekiel? Where was Jeremiah? Where was Isaiah before the destruction of the temple? Did their eyes not see it? Did their eyes not burn from the smoke that destroyed the temple when the city was on fire? Did they not have the pangs of hunger that the Israelites got to the point, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, where they had to eat their own children? Do you understand that? Can you comprehend that? Starvation was so food. There was no food that people ate their own children. Have you ever been that hungry before? Nobody has. And who had to endure all of that? The righteous. Why? God said, I'm going to keep my prophet there. And what is my prophet going to do? He's going to reveal the truth to you, to give you the opportunity to do what? To repent. And they weren't the only ones that were righteous. Obviously, the Bible highlights the ministries of these prophets, but God has always reserved a remnant. That's why Ezekiel chapter 9, the first thing that we read in verse 4, the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon their foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that are done in the midst thereof. The people who are weeping for the sins of the nation, they know they live in a nation that's wicked, that's corrupt. And they're weeping for it. God, have mercy upon us for what we are doing. I am embarrassed of this country. Embarrassed. We are butchering babies that have been just delivered. We have no problem with that. The church is quiet. 70,000 children are abducted, stolen every single year in the United States. The church is quiet. We selectively pick things we want to talk about because it bothers us, because somehow it has to do with the color of our skin. Men hate. Why do men hate? Why do men kill? Why is the world full of violence? Do you think any violence is acceptable? Do you think any hate is acceptable? Any murder? Do you think any of this is acceptable? None of it. So why is God keeping us here? We're supposed to set an example. That's why Paul said, don't let one of these things be named once among you. Not one single time. God's faithful herald. You know who God's faithful herald is? Creation. Creation is God's faithful herald. It never ever ceases to declare and demonstrate the glory of God. Night and day it speaks. Who's paying attention to it? Who? Only those who have eyes and ears to see and hear those spiritual things. God is so merciful that He keeps us here. But what are we going to be exempt from? Look, if you go back to the 10 plagues that God put on the children of Israel, what happened? How many of those plagues did the children of Israel go through? Did they personally go through? How many of them? 7 of the 10 plagues. 7! 3 of them, God said, I'm going to make a distinction. I don't have them memorized. The one that always stands out for me is darkness. Just imagine all of Egypt being so dark you can't even see your hand in front of you, but the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel lived, lit up. Imagine that. How come God didn't remove them before the plagues? How come God didn't remove them and then throw the plagues on Israel? This is what the church wants. The church wants to believe God's going to pour out the plagues on the world while we're gone. Well, why did He do it with the children of Israel? What was He doing in mercy for the Egyptians? Does God take pleasure in the death of an Egyptian that kept His people in slavery for 425 years? The answer is no. Whether or not a rabble or a group of Egyptians that even followed, some of them caused great discord and convinced the Israelites to actually sin, but some of them continued the message. There was salvation within that. God will constantly or forever keep His remnant here. Until what time? To the day of destruction. To the very day of destruction. Why? Because what is God? Merciful. Is He not merciful? You have any example of God's mercy in your life? And what is mercy always? Undeserved. You don't get mercy because you deserve it. You get mercy because you need it. Who needs mercy?
Everybody.
This guy, do you know it though? Because we could just say it, right? But do you need it? Oh my goodness. Examine my heart, examine my thoughts. God, please be merciful to me. I can't pride myself in anything. I can't boast about anything. Nothing can I boast about. Especially relative when it comes to comparing it to the glory of God. For all have sinned. For all have fallen short of the glory of God. I'm not comparing myself with other men. If I was to do that, first of all, I'd be wasting my time. And obviously I wouldn't be working. Because if I'm working, there's no way I could be comparing myself to people. Because I'm working, what am I focusing on? On my job. Not what's around me. Or not who's around me, rather. God's called me to be a minister. Preacher of reconciliation. To reconcile men back to God. I've had mercy on people that do not deserve mercy. That have done things to me in my life that do not deserve mercy at all. And guess what God puts in my heart? Immediately. It's not coming from me. Oh, don't you think for one moment that there is no vengeful bone in my body. God immediately, right, every time the opportunity came, was right there. What are you going to do, Ronnie? Mercy or vengeance? Oh, God. Why do you put it that way? Can't I just have a moment? Just a little bit of vengeance? Just a little bit? Nope. You choose. It's up to you. Don't ask me any questions. It's up to you. What do you want? Oh, I want mercy, God. Have mercy on me. Why do you think I want people to have mercy on God? Why do you think I want God to have mercy on people? Oh, goodness. Why do you think?
To continue to have it on you.
One of the most profound statements that Jesus ever said that I believe, at least in my life, what I hold on to. Blessed are the merciful. Why? For they shall receive mercy. What do you think I'm in desperate need of? I'm not talking about mercy now. I actually The reason why, why pastors are committing suicide is because they believe this lie that there's no suffering, and they don't know how to deal with suffering. I expect to suffer. Jesus told me, expect tribulation. Expect it. What happened to you? Expect tribulation. Be of good cheer. What? I will overcome. So I expect it. I expect to get beat up, lied to, kicked on, spit on, despitefully used. Who really cares? It doesn't really matter. When do you think I really want mercy then? I don't want mercy now. It just doesn't matter. It's just a light affliction. When do you think I want mercy? When I stand before God on Judgment Day. That's when I need mercy. Do you think that God can't pull out all the evidence against me? You think He can't? Well, you have no idea. God's not dumb. God's not ignorant. God hasn't lost all knowledge of everything I've ever committed. He promises not to bring it or charge it against me. That's my great hope. But my goodness, if He decides, which is totally contrary to who He is, that would make God a liar, which He's not. I would go right to hell. Straight to hell. I want mercy. That's why it's easier for me to have mercy on people than it is to seek justice, seek vengeance. There's no justice here. Don't think you will ever get justice here. Justice is not your interpretation of what good is anyway, or fair is anyway, because your interpretation of what is fair and good is totally corrupt. You know that. Because justice for you is always one-sided. It's in your favor. It's never in the favor of somebody else. So I don't want justice here. That's why, that's why the writers tell us what? Vengeance is mine, says the Lord, I will repay. I'll repay. What are you supposed to be known for? For mercy. You know my disciples by love. Perhaps the greatest act of love that will ever be demonstrated is mercy. It doesn't mean you accept it. It doesn't mean you're condoning it. It doesn't mean that it's right. No. You can have a hatred for it, but not the individual. If the salt has lost its flavor, what good are you? You're done. You're done. God's called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. You got to live in it. You have to be productive for Him. This is not about working so that you can get to heaven. It's being in love with God and loving the fact that He has been so merciful to you that you want to extend that mercy to as many people as you possibly can. The people that, how many times does God tell us to endure to the end? Why would He tell us to endure to the end if we're not going to be here? I'm going to take you out before it gets too hard. What's your interpretation of too hard? Seriously. Because everybody's interpretation of too hard is obviously different. I'm not committing suicide. I can compare the problems of my life with that man that just committed suicide. I can compare problems and say, hey, you know what? That's pretty weak for committing suicide. Which I'm not saying at all. I'm not even suggesting that. But obviously his level of tolerance is a lot lower than mine. But what's my level of tolerance that's ridiculous to somebody else? You understand? So nobody can say what tribulation is. You can't define it. You say, well, the Greek word is this, and in this context is that. Give me a break. So you mean to tell me that the martyrs of the early church who were being torn apart by lions, do you think that they weren't thinking that was the tribulation? What could be worse? Can you imagine? They're getting eaten by lions, torn apart, and they're like, man, I am so glad I'm not going through the Great Tribulation because this is way better than the Great Tribulation. You see how ridiculous our minds are, how they work? We live in such comfort. We freak out when somebody serves our meal cold. We can't handle it. I told you I didn't want beans. Oh my goodness. I told you to show up at 7. Oh, it's 7:10. That's not what I said. You freaking out over that. Tell me how we're going to do in the tribulation. Oh, that's why God has to take us out of here, because there's no way we would make it. Well, so let me ask a really silly question. How come God doesn't take us to heaven the moment we give our lives to Christ? Huh? Why?
Maybe he wants to test you.
How many people would be in heaven, percentage-wise, the moment they gave their life to Christ and didn't have to go through any trials, any struggles? Everybody, right? Is that how it works? No, it doesn't. And the silliness of saying a sinner's prayer, thinking that you're going to heaven because you said a sinner's prayer. If you actually believe that, I've said this before, if you actually believe that that's the truth, I suggest you get out of your chair, you're wasting your time in church right now, go to everybody that you know and just tell them. You don't even have to believe this. You don't have to do anything. Just repeat this prayer and you're going to heaven. You can live any way you want. Just say this prayer after me. If you really believe that that prayer is going to get somebody to heaven. Oh, we say it. How many times have you heard that in church before? Every head bowed, every eye closed, nobody looking. No reason for you to be ashamed. Jesus hung naked on the cross. We don't want you to have to actually stand up for your faith, but we want everybody to have their eyes closed, head bowed. Nobody making a sound. Quietly raise your hand. Nobody looking. Nobody looking. Everybody quiet. Silent. My goodness. And you expect these to be people who are going to, what? Defend the truth? Embarrassed to even say, hey, I love Jesus. I'm a sinner and I need him. Can't say that. Because then people would find out that I am a sinner. Yeah. Please, man. We already knew it. we knew you before you came in the door. Don't you know how furious gossip is? Have you heard gossip about anybody that's in this room? Nobody wants to admit it. Of course, we all have. Do we have evidence against each other for something? No. Whatever. We all do. But what do? We put on our fake smile. Oh, hi. How are you? And inside, I know what you did. I found about this and that and the other. What kind of people are we anyway? What are we? I don't look at anybody and think of what you've done. What I've heard about you. Anybody knows me anyway. As soon as you start gossiping, hey, just shut up. We're not having this conversation. If the person's here and you want to talk about it, we'll go right ahead. But if they're not, I don't want to hear about it. I hate gossip. Because most of the time, in order for gossip to be entertaining, what do we have to do? We have to add some extra spices to it, right? And a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of lemon, a lot of chili. None of it's true. We just add why. That's why we don't trust man. We don't put our hope in man. We don't put our trust in man. Where's our hope? It's in God. And if somebody's telling you the truth, iron sharpens iron. That's the purpose of church, is to be disciplined. And don't you think I'm disciplining you? You might be getting disciplined by God's word. God disciplined me. I can't, that's why I stand when I preach. You know that. Because I can't sit. I can't sit. If you've ever received a good spanking from your parents, can you sit comfortably? No. You can't. That's me. That's why I'm usually standing all day, every day. How come you're always standing? I can't sit. I'd love to sit, but I can't. Why? I just got another beating from my father. You're getting beatings at 52 years old. Go figure. You think at this age I should know already? What do you think? That's pretty embarrassing, right? A 52-year-old man still getting disciplined. You're half my age, right? No, you're not. A little bit more than half my age. I'm getting disciplined by my father every day. Every single day. And without it, I would be lost. I praise him for it. God's keeping me here. Why? For God so loved the good people that he gave his only begotten Son. Right? God so loved the world that he gave his only son. He who knew no sin became sin for you and me. You think he's going to remove me from this so that the world misses out on the opportunity to hear truth, to see an example, to see a man, an imperfect man, love God? No, he will not. My son, my grace is sufficient for you. You can endure this. You can endure any trial, any tribulation, no matter how great. I'm not experiencing the plague of God. God's not pouring his wrath out on me. He's pouring it out on the wicked, and he's put a mark on my forehead. He said, that's my righteous. That's my holy servant. Listen to him, follow him. Oh, I'm going to endure the consequences of the sin of men, just like Joshua, just like Caleb, just like Moses, just like Abraham, just like Daniel, just like every prophet, just like Job, every single man, just like every woman, every man, every child that ever had to suffer for this gospel. God's grace. So apparently God's grace is not sufficient in the Great Tribulation, because that's why he has to remove us. Is God's grace sufficient in the Great Tribulation? Yes or no?
Yes.
Where sin abounds,
Grace
that much more. Exponentially, grace abounds. When do you think grace is needed? Specifically in the time of sin. At that moment. That's why we're told, we're encouraged to come into the throne room, enter boldly, where we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. That's when we rush into the throne room, not because we want a TV or win the lottery ticket or whatever our lame petition is. God, keep me from sinning. Keep me from this hour. What did Jesus teach his disciples? Deliver me from evil. Deliver me from it. Father, I'm not praying that you take them out of the world. God didn't take them out of the world. What did he tell us to do? Go into the world, not to participate with them, but to preach the gospel, to be an example. Why does the church think that it's going to be protected in some haven? We're going to be in some little bubble. Any of you living in a bubble now? This is a pretty ugly bubble, the one I live in. It's a nasty bubble. I'd like to move to your bubble. And you're like, you're not invited to my bubble. My bubble's organized. You bring chaos. I tell people that work with me from the beginning, look, I want to let you know something. Everything in my life goes wrong. Because God's testing me. Would you like to work with me? Because it's going to be work. You know what I'm known for? Work. That defines me. Work. Whatever we do is work. How come it can't be easy? Nothing is anything easy with me. I can send you to do the simplest little job, and what's going to happen? Huh? You're going to be there all day. Why did you take all day? Well, this happened, that happened, this happened, the other thing happened, and that didn't show up, and this didn't show up, and this and that. But I don't understand. It was a simple little thing. That's why a lot of people don't want to work for me, because what are they going to experience? I don't want to be riding on your ship. I don't want to be a passenger on your boat. You let me know how it goes. You never want to be I don't think you ever want to be around a man being tested by God. Pray for him. Pray for her. At a distance. Don't get on the boat with them. Because guess what's going to happen? You're going to lose. But if you loved them, what would you do? Get on the boat with them. Where was Jesus in the middle of the storm? He was on the boat with them. And when they found themselves alone on the storm, what did Jesus do? He walked. He said he was going to walk. He intended to walk past them. But what happened? Who saw him? Peter. Why Peter? How come Peter's not bailing water out? when they're gonna perish. What is Peter looking for? Where's my Jesus? He's always around. Jesus has never failed me. Where is he? And he even looks out in the storm, and where is Jesus? Why do you think Peter said, tell me to come out with you? He didn't know what he was saying. He was so ignorant, Peter. That's me. Ignorant. You don't even know what you're talking about. But he just loves Jesus so much. Always putting his foot in his mouth, always saying things he doesn't belong saying. Timing is absolutely terrible with this guy. But so in love with him was Peter. I am totally imperfect. And the one thing I will always do for the rest of my life is defend this gospel. And I will never tell you a lie. It's going to be so difficult, you're not going to know what to do. You're not going to know where to turn. Well, you know what? I'm going to tell you where to turn and what to do. You turn to him. God has got to become your father. And until he becomes your father, you are just a dependent. Dependent upon whatever it is. Somebody, something. You will never be free. I'm free because I know who my father is. And there isn't any trial that he will put me through that I cannot possibly endure, or he will not provide a way out for me. That's my father. And even when I have been rebellious, what does my father do? Oh, he disciplines me and he calls me back. Come here, boy. I love you. This is what you need to do. You got to get to the point where you're tired of disobeying. You say that I'm not going to disobey anymore. And it's going to cost you. Obedience is going to cost you. It's going to cost you a lot. So what? As long as I'm right with my Father, nothing matters to me. God's mercy is why the church is going to be left here. And the church is going to learn and finally do its job. For whom? For Israel. Because God has an eternal covenant with Israel. God's not going to let his children perish. Israel. Because we're so spoiled, because we don't like discomfort. No, I'm going to leave it here. And those who endure, you know the beauty thing? Those who are martyred during the tribulation, you know what their prize is? They get to reign for 1,000 years with Jesus before judgment. That's their gift. And they know that. They know it. I would much, as the writer of Hebrews tells us, that those who suffered, let's read it, rather than me ad-libbing. Go to Hebrews chapter 11. The very end. This is the faith chapter. We don't realize that faith in God does not always produce a positive outcome for us here. Faith in God does not always produce a positive outcome for us here. If you don't get anything out of this today, get that. Faith in God does not mean that you are going to win here. You will win, but not necessarily here. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, what did they experience? Victory here. But not everybody that has faith experiences victory here. At the very end, verse 35. Women received their dead raised to life again. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance that they may obtain a better resurrection. There are those who say, no, I will suffer. I don't want God to deliver me. Because I want that special prize, that special reward that allows me to be in the presence of Jesus for 1,000 years before anybody else. That's like winning the lottery. I'll lose now. Beheaded, tortured, it doesn't matter. Still others, verse 36, still others had the trial of mockings and scourging, yes, of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in two, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts, in mountains, in dens, in caves of the earth. All of these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise. God having something better for us, that they should not be made perfect apart from us. Men being perfected through trials, tribulation. That's how God works. How do you get gold to be so precious? What do you have to do to it?
Put it in the fire.
You've got to put it through fire. The more precious you want it, what do you have to do?
More
You've
fire.
got to raise the temperature. It's not the same temperature. It's not the same fire. You have to raise the temperature of the fire. If you want the purest of gold, how do you want to be before God? What kind of setting, what kind of jewel do you want to be in Christ's crown? I don't want to wear a crown. I just want to let you know that. I'm not worthy to wear a crown. There's only one person worthy to wear a crown. And it's not me. I would love to be a jewel in his crown. And I don't want to be some dirty piece of gold. I want to be the purest piece of gold. Not so that people see it. So it makes him look even better. So he is glorified. That's what this whole life is about. The church continues to miss the mark. We continue to miss the mark. But what does God do in his mercy? He reminds us. He's constantly here to discipline us. As Isaiah said, if it wasn't for God, we would be like Sodom and Gomorrah. All of us. If it was not for God, we would be like Sodom and Gomorrah. But God, in his mercy, has spared a remnant. Let's pray. Father, we thank you that you have put a mark on us. Father, may we never forget this. May we live our lives in such fear, such conviction. God, even as you are teaching me to this very day, God, to quickly extinguish the vengeance, the hate, the jealousy, whatever it is, and to quickly turn to Scripture, speaking the gospel, singing in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, edifying, building up, God. And forgive me, God, for ever challenging a man, assuming, God, I assume that he can take the discipline and find out that he can't. Because, God, it's the method in which I deliver it. God, I pray that you would soften my character according to your will. Yes, no, I know, Father, that your men that you have selected, God, you have made their foreheads like flints. So strong, God. But, God, these same prophets, you also would see them weeping, God. Weeping for the people, that you be merciful. Oh, God, we are such a wicked, wicked nation. What have we done? What have we become? Unfortunately, the sins of this nation have reached your throne. You're providing for us a warning. Please quicken the church. Waken her. Let her understand what her responsibility is. Forgive us for our ignorance, being so lazy. God, may we not lose that flavor as the salt of the earth, for at that point, Father, it is too late. We are good for nothing. I pray, Father, that we will take this message that we have received today, take it to heart. Not only take it to heart, but to put it to practice. God, you are merciful. May we extend the hand of mercy to everyone, particularly to those who do not deserve it. May we never forget the mercy that we have received and continue to receive. Your name be glorified. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Before we take prayer requests, is there anything anybody would like to share?